what are your thoughts on the ego, even then with the soul and its development through life and the purpose truly of the ego and how we work with it and not enslave us unknowingly?
First of all, I get irritated when I see all these spiritual gurus and teachers and authors bashing the ego. You got to get rid of the ego. It's such a shallow understanding of the ego. The ego is the gift of God, of individuality. Without the ego, there cannot be an experience of love because the ego is self-differentiation. You see, if you had no ego, you wouldn't know you were talking to Paul Chek right now. You'd think maybe that I was just another part of you or a tree in the forest or something like that. So it's your ego that gives you your sense of self, which ultimately is what leads to individuation in Jungian psychology, the ability to be a self-responsible agent in the world that contributes to the world and isn't a codependent or a child that needs other people to care for it. So the principle of the ego, first and foremost, is that without a sense of I, there can be no thou to love. And all love relationships are I, thou. If I love racing a car, then I love my car. If I love my kids, it's I, thou. If I love my wife or wives, it's I, thou. So first and foremost, you can't have love without the illusion of separation. Okay? Second of all, if you didn't have an ego, you would have no way to evaluate your own sense of yourself and where you could grow and become, and you wouldn't have your own personal interests. You see, what the World Economic Forum is doing is essentially trying to abolish the ego so that everybody in the world becomes like robots, all controlled by one control mechanism. That's the most dangerous thing you can do. And so without the ego, you don't have this sense of individuality, which in nature is diversity. So the same way they've taken, I remember reading in a farming journal years ago that there's something like 174 species of apples. And this was a journal from England, and they said that now only something along the lines of 3 to 5 species of apples are raised by about 95% of the farmers. So what you see is if you have 195 different types of apple tree, they're all going to be specialized to survive in slightly different environments with slightly different microorganism populations, with different amounts of light and shade, with different amounts of rain and dry. So if something comes along and you've only got 3 to 5 different species of apples, none of which are very good at low water situations or a drought, you lose everything. But if you've got 175 species of apples, you have enough diversity that there's always going to be apples around in almost any environment. So when you start saying, okay, the ego gives us individuality, which gives us diversity, like different types of apples, when you start seeing religious monocropping and social monocropping, which is what Nazism was all about, get rid of everybody but the Aryans and try to narrow it down to just the one elite race, which is exactly what the World Economic Forum is doing. And it's exactly what's happening in universities all over the world. They're letting the education be more and more controlled by corporate interests that fund them. You know, the average medical doctor's education, 60% of the average medical doctor's education is paid for by drug manufacturing companies. So there's no way you can exclude that much influence from the curriculum. And what do we have today? We got doctors all over the world, most of which don't know anything about the real natural functions of the body, the etiology of the disease. The average doctor spends less than 6 minutes with a patient. The average doctor has been found to interrupt their patient within 20 seconds of the patient trying to talk to the doctor. and they're all prescribing out of a book, the same DSM manual. They look at data. They don't look at people. So what you're seeing in this example is a monocropping of medicine that excludes diversity. Now, if you say, okay, I'm going to look at the symptom profile of 100 people that all have adrenal fatigue. Well, you're going to have 100 different symptom cases, and there's going to be some commonalities amongst them, but there's going to be vast differences. One's going through a divorce, another one's got a parasite infection, another one's got a fungal infection, another one lost their mother in a car accident a month ago and is in a deep state of grief, etc. So as soon as you start monocropping people, which means you abolish the ego and turn them into basically a school of fish, then you lose the diversity. And, I saw Elon Musk in an interview at the Davos meeting of the World Economic Forum, and he was very honest. He said, I don't think this whole idea of making everybody in the world the same is a good idea, because nationalism makes sure that each of us is doing things slightly different, so that if there's ever a significant disaster, we have multiple approaches and it enhances our survivability. So getting rid of the ego is the same thing as getting rid of diversity in nature, which decreases survivability. And the more you get rid of the ego, the more you have people thinking and therefore creating along the same lines, and therefore more unconscious of the potential risks and mistakes of that line of thinking. For example, chiropractic and osteopathy have a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. Chiropractic, osteopathy, and physical therapy have a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. So if we said, okay, we're going to get rid of the differences and we're going to make them all the same, there would be a lot of people that couldn't get help by a chiropractor, but could get it by an osteopath or a physio. So we don't want to get rid of the ego, but what we want to do is, you see, the ego goes through a natural stage of evolution. First, it's I-centric. A child is always I-centric. Mommy, I'm hungry. Mommy, I'm thirsty. Mommy, I want. Me. I'm tired. Because the child has to focus on itself, or its chances of survival go down. So it has to be self-oriented as a survival strategy. We grow from I-centric to ethnocentric, which is my group or my tribe. Who are my people? And that's about the highest that most of the religions in the world get to, is ethnocentric, which means my group against your group. And so you see all this warring about what God is and what God wants, and who is the chosen people. And so you end up with this low level of development because the ego just extends itself to a group. Then we evolve to world-centric, where all of a sudden, through our life experience, through our studies, we come to realize, wow, the way they do things in Africa is different, but there's a lot of really, like, African food is good, African music is good, African spirituality is different. They've got some neat concepts. And then you get a Christian that finds a book on Buddhism and all of a sudden sees the world in a much more expanded way. And you get artists that start working with, electrical engineers and aerodynamics engineers to make new models for cars. And so you see that as we grow into this world-centric orientation, it shows that our sphere of influence is expanding. So our sense of ourself in the world is not just mommy and daddy or the people that practice the same religion I do. We realize that, wow, the music I like comes from all over the world. I love food from all over the world. I love religions from around the world. And I see the world as much more wholesome that way. And I see a lot more solutions to challenges by looking at different systems of thinking. And so as you grow, you actually start to recognize yourself in the Africans, and yourself in the Brazilians and the Mexicans and the Chinese and the Germans and the, Norwegians. And then you go, wow, there's so much beauty in Zoroastrianism in this regard. I don't really like this part, but boy, this part's beautiful. And the Hindu religion, it's fascinating. And boy, it's amazing. After studying Buddhism and Hinduism, I realize I'm not going to burn in hell for sinning. And so you feel much more free. So if you look at what defines spirituality, one of the best definitions of spirituality is a progressively expanding sphere of awareness. So you start to be aware that, if I said, Guy, who made that microphone hanging in front of you? Well, you'd look on it, you might find it was made in anywhere. It could be made in China. It could be made in Rochester, New York. Then you say, okay, who made your keyboard? Oh, maybe it's a Mac. It was made by Mac somewhere in the United States. But my point is, when you start looking around, even in your own house, who made your glasses? Who made the earphones in your head? You realize people with completely different mindsets, completely different ways of relating, skill sets from all over the world are involved in everything that we do. So as we grow spiritually and as we grow as students, we start realizing that the whole world is involved in the creation of every one of us. And so instead of getting rid of the ego, you start transcending the limitations of the programmed ego. And all of a sudden, your ego becomes more and more porous. And that's what it means to become self-realized, right? The ego represents the little self, the I, me, mine. But the capital SELF represents everything that supports you, which is the earth, the water, the warmth of the sun, the air that you breathe, the house you live in, the car you drive, the family that you have, the friends you have, the people that have educated you. And then you realize, wow, well, no life on earth could exist without the sun. So hell, the sun lives in me too. Right?
Totally.
So you get to the point where you come to the realization, and this is called the positiva path of spiritual development. Through continually studying and being aware, you grow until you realize that what you are took the entire universe to create. Or you can take the Taoist path, which is called the negativa path, where you unlearn and unlearn and unlearn until your head's so empty that the whole world pours into it like an empty cup that can hold anything. But our Western culture is more positiva, add to, add to, add to. Finally, all the dots connect and you go, holy shit, it took the whole universe to make me. And that leads to even more interesting questions like, well, if it took the whole universe to make me, then when I die, it certainly can't be the end, because why would the universe invest all this time, energy, and resources into making something that's just going to die? And then you look at the second law of thermodynamics, which basically says energy produced cannot be destroyed, only transformed, and everything in the entire universe is made of energy and information. So then all of a sudden you realize science even backs reincarnation without realizing it. To me, that's the fun of learning.
It's funny, the older I get, the more questions I have.
Right. That's how you know you're getting smarter.
I hope so. It sometimes doesn't feel that way.